Hello out there, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, streaming live. It's so nice to be here on this fine evening. So tonight I got in-studio guests. It's super cool. I'm going to pull these guys on. Hopefully everything is going to work because I'm working really hard on the lighting today and driving my poor Grace crazy. Oh, you know what? Let me lower this so that we don't hear it. Live in real time. I love live in real time. So let me welcome Dave and Trisha. Hey guys.
Hey.
How are you?
Good.
So I invited you guys over because we've had conversations and I have no real understanding about anarchy. Like I have ideas about what anarchy is, and but I'm completely ignorant. And I'm just thinking about trying to come up with ideas of life like outside of the two-party system and the place that we find ourselves in. Like, can we live without this government the way it's functioning now? So fill me in.
Well,
it's a lot of questions.
Well, the easy answer is absolutely. Anarchists definitely believe that the government in general is, or even specifically, is unnecessary, and that there are, throughout history, there's been many great thinkers. Not among the least of them is Kropotkin, who championed the idea of mutual aid as being a way of getting people to work without governments. And really, the goal of anarchism in many ways is to have the most efficient society that we can have.
That's so opposite of what that's so interesting because that's so opposite of what I always was thinking that was anarchy, because I would think that, it's just this total chaos.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
but
yeah.
The state made sure, that people grossly misunderstood anarchism.
Yeah, and also, so the etymology of the word anarchism, or anarchy, is without rulers. Trisha goes into explaining that quite well. But that's what it really means. It means without rulers. It doesn't mean without laws. It means without rulers.
Mm-hmm. So it's without rulers. So, and let's just think about that for a second, too, because, the whole idea with common law and, these laws, look at what our legislator is doing right now, the legislative body. They've just granted Lamont more extension of his emergency powers.
Yeah.
They're producing bill after bill after bill, and it's at some point it's like, wait a minute, is this what we're designed to do? We're not designed for this style of representation. We're more like anarchists. Would I be mistaken in saying that if you're closer to the idea of a republic and the law of the land being something where the Constitution gave us the ability to be empowered outside of this rulership by kings or
Well, yeah, there's. It's hard to say that that's closer to anarchy. Or anarchism. When you think about it, if you have a government, if you have a society where you elect politicians, you automatically have disproportionate power. Instead of everyone being socially equal, the people who are elected have more power than the people who elect them. And that's kind of where you get that imbalance. Now, for some people, we grow up, and that's good. That's what we're taught. And when the founding of America, as a government, as a republic, or whatever you want to call it, that's what we're taught. In our schools, public schools, we're kind of, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but that's what it is. And
that's absolutely what it is.
So yeah, we're it's kind of. Let me read you a quote.
Okay, cool. Yes,
it's
please.
It's kind of a long quote, and this was written by one of the first people, if not the first person to actually consider themselves an anarchist back in the 1800s, Pierre Joseph Proudhon. And the quote goes like this: "To be governed is to be watched, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered, regulated, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, checked, estimated, valued, censured, commanded by creatures who have neither the right nor the wisdom nor the virtue to do so. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction noted, registered, counted, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, addressed, licensed, authorized, admonished, prevented, forbidden, reformed, corrected, punished. It is under pretext of public utility and in the name of the general interest to be placed under contribution, drilled, fleeced, exploited, monopolized, extorted from, squeezed, hoaxed, robbed, and then, at the slightest resistance, the first word of complaint, to be repressed, refined, vilified, harassed, hunted down, abused, clubbed, disarmed, bound, choked, imprisoned, judged, condemned, shot, deported, sacrificed, sold, betrayed, and to crown all, mocked, ridiculed, derided, outraged, and dishonored. That is government. That is its justice. That is its morality.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Who is that again that you just quoted?
Pierre Joseph Proudhon.
Okay, cool. Wow.
Yeah, he's considered one of the seminal anarchist thinkers of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's one view. And if you go throughout, there's a lot of great minds in anarchism, and it goes back to the 1700s in England with I think William Godwin, or Goodwin, his name is, and through modern times. Yeah,
Godwin.
and so there's a lot to learn from. There's anarchism itself is very, divided. It's almost like the many sects of Christianity, although it's not religious.
That division.
Yeah, it's so much division. You have
There's so much division.
So
Isn't
much.
that the case with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everybody loves their flags, even anarchists.
Yeah, no, it's true.
I'm very
It's
much
true.
not. It's secondary to me. I'm very much an F your flags kind of anarchist.
Right.
All of that is secondary.
And you have anarcho-communists. You have Noam Chomsky claims to be an anarcho-syndicalist, and there are different ways of, and a lot of them really kind of describe how this stuff would sort of play out.
Yeah.
And but
He thinks he's an anarcho-syndicalist, but he's really a commie. But whatever.
yeah, and yeah, he's kind of a commie.
Yeah.
But
He's
it
towing the
depends.
line.
There's different types of communism as well. And there's communism and anarchism. Kind of they were bedfellows for a very long time, because they were very far on the left, and they used a lot of revolutionary means to create their ends. So you have the Marxists, for instance. They want to have a revolution, and then they want to replace whatever government they're overthrowing with a dictatorship of the proletariat, and then that is supposed to fade into what would be considered an anarchist society. But
Interesting.
you can't. I think it was Errico Malatesta who said that, and I don't know the exact words. I'm not much for quotes, but he made the observation that if you don't achieve anarchy before you institute a government like a proletariat, like a dictatorship through proletariat, then you're going to end up basically creating a position where people are going to beg for the bourgeois capitalism to come back. And it's funny, when you look at Russia, that's exactly what happened.
Wow,
Oh, yeah.
fascinating.
Is exactly what happened. And some of the early anarchists and the anarcho-communists like Kropotkin, these guys wanted the anarchist ideal. They wanted an anarchist society. They didn't want a proletariat dictatorship. But what ended up happening is the Marxists took over.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating. So Karen asked the question: is Antifa an anarchist group?
They like to think they are.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Lots
Yeah.
of people like to think they are.
Yeah, I mean,
They're actually violent and commit acts of aggression and are have a tiny little fascist living in their heart, but
Right.
they don't realize that. So yeah.
And it's interesting too. What I think the connection with what you were just talking about with the proletariat and the way that they the way society is destructed and raised up for this like socialism, which leads to fascism and communism. And it's really interesting. Ron Paul had written something beautiful about that today. But anyway, I'm just getting sidetracked here. But those, I don't know, people aren't seeing that. It's so poignant what you were just saying about anarchy.
Yeah, and just to go a little bit further into what Karen was asking, what Antifa kind of does is use tactics, the far left tactics, and they are very similar to tactics that have been used and continue to be used, not just by anarchists, but by all kinds of leftist groups. So it's easy for someone to get involved in a group like Antifa, even if it's in name, and they want to scream and yell at whatever government they think that they're fighting. In reality, and a lot of post-left anarchists are want to say that really what they're doing is they're kind of begging for the government to piecemeal out little limited forms of liberation, whether it's gay rights or...
They're provocateurs.
Well, they're provocateurs,
Yeah.
but more importantly, they're not looking to overthrow government. They're not doing anything valuable, and if you're not doing anything valuable as an anarchist, then I hate to say it, you're not an anarchist.
Yeah.
And since most of them really are just part of these leftist partial liberation movements, pick whatever social justice you want to fight for, and it's really just complaining about people, and at the end of the day, it's really just complaining about white people, and that's not anarchism. I'm sorry, if you're not for removing the oppressive hierarchies and oppressive institutions, then you're not really an anarchist.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and there are quite a few anarchists like ourselves. I have a great group of friends that are anarchists. We don't really like to be lumped in by mainstream, as we call status, people who believe in the state. We don't like to be lumped in with violent radical leftists, and we see a trend of what used to be moderates and liberals radicalized by leftist ideals. And Antifa's been around for a long time, and it's a misconception that they're an organization. They're actually not. They're not centralized at all. It's very much an individual thing. I mean, Antifa, it's not like it's this, LLC or whatever. I mean, anyone can, have a flag and slap Antifa on their sigil. It's very much, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know. Lame?
I don't know. It's
Lame?
not centralized.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So
Call it lame.
So people think that there's, and it's not to say that there aren't groups that form and they have, different, agendas or, tenets or whatever, but it's not like this centralized thing you would think of, like, say, the Libertarian Party or something like that. So.
And if Antifa were truly fighting fascism, I'm in. Give me one of those hoodies.
It's kind
Give
of
me
ironic.
an anonymous mask. Whatever. I'm in. But it doesn't seem like they're fighting fascism. They're using fascism as a label to call things they don't like.
Yeah, they've limited it.
Yeah, and so that's where I stand with Antifa.
Mm-hmm.
Great, if you're fighting fascism, that's great. But don't just call what you don't like fascism and say,
well, they would probably have a serious
look at my
problem.
black hoodie.
And that's the thing is, I kind of feel like there's a really important thing that is lost in translation when a foundational understanding of a word or a phrase is kind of used to this ambiguous purpose. Context is really important, and I believe that there are a lot of people out there saying, they identify as this or they identify something else that they hate as a certain thing, but is it really that thing, And that's really important to me. I kind of feel having a root understanding, I think, would dissolve a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of hesitancy and distrust between groups. I think it could actually bridge a lot of things towards collaborative efforts to stand for people's liberties, but everybody's, I think, just not understanding one another.
Yeah, there's a
a
lot
lot
of-
lately. So, you know, it's kind of difficult to have dialogue when, you know, you're not coming to the table with mutual understanding about the thing you're talking about, you know, like anarchism. You know, even I work, you know, working in medical freedom and, you know, against the lockdowns and mask mandates and things like that. You know, there's a very large population of conservative right leaning constituency that I collaborate with. And, you know, my opinion is I'll stand with anyone who will stand for freedom. You know, I don't care. So even they, you know, when they find out that I'm an anarchist or whatever, some of them get, you know, really, really reactive because they think that I'm actually like a spy.
I'm a spy.
Like a spy in the groups, you know?
Oh, she's
Oh,
an
yeah.
anarchist.
Oh, yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
yeah.
watch out
Yeah.
for her. So
And I'm an infiltrator trying to convert people to communism. It's that tribalistic, you know?
yeah. So I appreciate you asking questions, Karen. This is a great question. What is the difference between libertarianism and anarchism?
Oh, libertarianism is just the tip of fascism.
With diet
Yeah.
No, it's the
It's
tip
diet
of anarchy.
freedom.
Diet
No,
freedom.
it's
No.
it's diet
Okay, so
freedom.
this requires
Sorry, libertarians.
this requires some
I
discussion.
do love libertarians.
No, we do. We get along with libertarians quite well, but
Oh boy,
Here-
we hit a topic, huh?
so that's
I'm gonna take a
that's
sip
a
of
really
water,
good
I'm
question.
thirsty.
That's a really good question, Karen. So libertarianism, as we know it here in America today, modern times, is really sort of it was a term that was co-opted, I think, in the 70s. And the term goes way farther back. In fact, in many ways, historically, the term libertarian was synonymous with anarchism. In a lot of terms,
Big
things
L,
that,
little L.
you know, it's easy to get
There's a difference.
confused. It's easy to get confused with the terms. So we look at socialism like socialism bad. We look at communism bad. But what we're talking about is types of socialism, communism. So we're talking about state socialism. You know, statist forms of communism, and because they end up, you know, if you have a socialist government, and socialism is supposed to be having the people, the workers are, you know, in control of the means of production, all this other stuff. But if you have a centralized state that controls all that, well, you just gave control of the state and not to the people, not to the workers. So it gets very complicated. You end up lifting up, you know, that small portion, the worst part of your society ends up becoming in power because that's just what happens. But as far as libertarian, another name for anarchism back in the day was libertarian socialism. And, you know,
Interesting. I never knew
libertarianism
that.
is really about
Okay.
having small government, you know, and less intrusion. Socialism is really about social equality. So when you combine those two together, you have a really good description of what anarchism is. A more accurate description than just saying anarchy or without rulers, because it's important that anarchism is not just a negative. It's not a negation of government. It's an acknowledgement that man does not need government to have an effective society, and a good society, and a moral society.
Yeah.
And an anarchist is not predicated on a stateless
Right.
society. You can be an anarchist and be, I mean, there are those purists, you know, I mean, everybody's got an opinion. You mean, you know, no belief is immune to arrogance, you know, or
I like that. That's great.
Yeah, and
but even I can be arrogant sometimes, you know, but I what was I saying? Oh, not predicated on a stateless society, sorry. You know, there are lots of ways. People don't even realize that there are lots of ways that you go about your day, every day. You know, as committing acts of anarchism. That's not what I mean to say it. But, you know, people would be surprised how many times throughout their day that they choose to spend their day advocating for their autonomy in many different ways, or breaking laws, like going over the speed limit, you know, or things like that, you know, that, you know, just things like that. So I think people, if they really understood anarchism, they would understand that at its simplest, it just basically means that forced relationships are immoral, and that voluntary consent, informed voluntary consent, is supreme.
Yeah, because I think right now where we're at is with our government and it's so. I like this. I like this whole conversation on anarchy because it resonates with me, because our government is so at this place in life where, especially here in Connecticut, and I feel like we are at this point where the state has total control over the sovereign person, and it's these representatives who want to tell us how to live and how to be, and someone can say, well, that's what a legislator does. And anarchism is making more sense to me in the respect that honoring the person and not having these rulers. So there's law. So anarchism isn't to be construed with lawlessness.
Correct.
It is to be, you're leading yourself, but there are laws are like common law. Would you say that this would equate to being what, there's a lot of discussion out there about common law? Basic, more like, I'm not going to come over and like punch you in the head or something, or dump. I'm not going to come and dump my trash on your front lawn, or suppose I'm a big company, I don't have the right to come and dump my chemicals into the oceans and the waters, because that's just a common law. We don't need more legislation or regulatory agencies these are common laws. We don't need rulership with that.
Well, yeah, you bring up a good point. And really, what you're really talking about is, what's that word? Accountability.
Yeah.
What you're really talking about is personal accountability. So, take where I live. I live in Bristol, and we live kind of down. You've been to my house. If you go to the front yard, and any day with a clear yard, you're going to see little nippers. You're going to see cigarette butts. You got a gas station next door. Across the street, there's a bar. There's several areas where hobos are camping out, and I call it home. But
we love it.
There's a lack of accountability. People don't know what it means to be truly accountable for themselves.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because we have the government to take care of most of that.
A lot of people defer their accountability to the state. I mean, all of us do it. I don't think anyone can sit here and say that they never do it. Sometimes you're just not as mindful. It's like, oh, well, we pay our taxes so that they clean up the park and they pick up the garbage and they, and sometimes...
And that's not, obviously it's not true for everybody.
Right.
They take care of the yards. They're very courteous.
Oh, yeah.
They're not getting in anybody's way and what have you. But it's creates a situation where there's a portion of our population that is not accountable, and they don't care. And sometimes they're just kids. Sometimes they're local hoodlums. Sometimes they're just people. They don't care at all. Been many bad neighbors.
Yeah. Well, it's human nature, right? Like there's this core aspect of human nature where how to live in a world with this situation where you have the bad things that people do.
That's a great point.
And it's difficult. It's hard to navigate. The human nature. There are not nice people in this world. We can't legislate ourselves out of a problem. I think that government gets that confused. That we're going to legislate this problem away, and that more laws don't make for just human beings. I think to make just human beings would to have a system that runs more honestly and without so much corruption. But then again, what human nature is can you have a system of government? Like I always thought as a kid growing up, I loved history and I loved learning about the American Constitution and the Revolution and how we became who we are, even with our dark past where we took the land away from other people that were here. Is pretty brutal and awful and ugly. But then we created this document that I thought was great. It's freedom and freedom of speech and freedom to be who you are and limited government. And you know, it's so corrupted that I have no faith in government. I just don't. I think the government is making my life miserable right now in Connecticut, making me want to leave my home that I thought I would be in for maybe ever. There was a time where I loved being in Connecticut. I thought, wow, we are free. We can homeschool.
Yep.
I had my children at home with midwives. I could get raw milk and meat from a farmer. And meanwhile, my mom in New York had more restrictions and things like that. I thought, Connecticut's so wonderful. And now I'm like, they're destroying it. And it was being destroyed before I even got here when they brought in the income tax.
Yeah, absolutely. And
just...
You know, it just, not to interrupt you, but, like, speaking of homeschooling, like when Trisha and I first started homeschooling our son, we were surprised to find out how awesome Connecticut was when it came to homeschooling rights. And it really wasn't, they weren't guaranteeing rights or anything. They just weren't messing with you.
Yeah.
Like, they weren't regulating what you did.
That's the difference.
They respected the right of the parent to educate their child as they saw fit. And it was, and we had people that fought for those rights here in Connecticut. Like what's her name?
Deborah Stevens.
Yeah,
Deborah Stevenson.
Perfect example.
She's a rock star.
Then we found out that they were starting to come after that stuff. So they look at what happens in a state like New York or California, and they want to start going, oh, well, that's a good idea. I'm not sure how this comes down the pipe, but it seems like it starts in New York or California, and then it starts to spread like a disease across the state, like a pandemic, and you end up with having to fight for the rights you already have. And we did this we're doing this with medical freedom, but with homeschooling, it was that thing. And so you're listening, we went to the LOB, and we watched, or no, we didn't go to the LOB, but we watched what was happening, and it was amazing. They took these incidents that happened with these kids that wasn't related to homeschooling at all and used it as an excuse to institute regulations and all these things that they wanted to do to homeschooling families. You know, inspecting their houses and having all these
mental health wellness,
and just putting people in
from
between
social
you and your
services
kids
assigned to homeschooling families. All these ideas
it
being
was
tossed
real
around. There was that summit at Harvard.
Now, when was this happening?
This is about 3 or 4 years ago.
See, I had come out of the loop of homeschooling. My kids ended up wanting to go to, middle school. God, I don't even know why, but I acquiesced to that. But I was out of the loop, so I didn't hear about this, and that's just really shocking. That's really, really bad. So you guys were able to fight it back and keep them. The homeschool community in Connecticut is pretty active, and I remember one time, this was before the HB 5044 in 2019, where I was up at the LOB for homeschooling. We were defending homeschooling then. They were attacking it, and they wanted parents to have to report and register with the state who were homeschooling. And it was amazing to be a part of it because the Capitol was just overflowing with families, and it was a beautiful sight. That it was amazing. And the only other time I could compare it to is, of course, in 2019 with SB 5044.
Oh yeah,
with
you were
and
there.
Now being ignored, but that's a whole. Don't want to veer off too much. I mean, we could get right into that conversation too, but that was pretty powerful. So you guys were able to beat back the regulations or whatever laws they were trying to pass.
Yeah, it never went. I guess it never really went forward.
No,
and fortunately, but it's.
They keep attacking it.
Yeah, when I saw how backhanded they were, I mean, as if they wanted, as if our DCF, isn't overwhelmed already.
Enough.
They wanted to just make them do even more, and it's insane to me. And it really, what it is, it's politicians and it's people up there influencing politicians that want certain things passed, and these guys are all buddies, and they're doing it to you. And with the religious exemption is no different. We fought it in 2019, and we should have beaten it. They should have not voted it through. But they did anyways because they didn't care what we did.
Same thing with
And
California.
we came back even stronger this year, and they're stacking the committees. This is what they do. This is what this is what your government does.
Yeah.
They stack it because they're going to make it happen no matter what. And this kind of thing, whether with vaccines in particular, I don't want it to be a vaccine discussion, but we're talking about legislation, and they are going to push it through. Doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter if you have 15 to 20,000 signatures to get them to stop. It doesn't matter if you line up 4 days worth of testimony for them to listen to in an unprecedented event. They're going to go, oh, well, we're still going to do it anyways, but thanks.
It's amazing to me how they have this ego about that too. Like Representative Cook, I think it was, that said this, where she, it was brought up in the hearing and this is what we're talking about now, specifically for anybody just kind of tuning in here in the state of Connecticut, which is really a blueprint, I think, for the nation as well, because Lamont is deeply connected to Biden. He was on the phone with Biden early on before Biden was officially a president or appointed, whatever. I'm not going to get into all that, but so we are like this protege type. So for these two bills that what they're doing is just so dubious, and they're discounting stuff like Representative Cook saying, so what if you've had 15,000 people sign this petition? It doesn't matter. You're just a minority. And to hear this coming out of a representative, it's like, wait a minute. It doesn't. It goes against everything to equal representation under the law and to be respected. And we are showing up at the Capitol because this is the bill that affects our lives that you're proposing, and it's not affecting the people you say you are protecting. You're not protecting anyone. No one's asking you to do this. It's basically they've gotten in bed with the media, where the media is manipulated by the ruling party right now, and you see it at a national level.
It's a propaganda mouthpiece of for the state, for the ruling.
It totally is. And then with Tong coming out and saying that he's going to stop debate and everything else. So this is just absolutely nuts.
Absolutely.
And they're not even hiding it. And this is how blatant it's got. I saw earlier that Karen had asked who we thought was more fascist, Trump or Biden. Now, I'm not going to really answer that question, but I can tell you that there is some fascism coming out of Biden for sure. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with the control of the media and just the bedfellows of the media, the pharmaceutical industry, and the emerging technocracy that's happening here in America. They're not hiding it from you. They're doing it to your face, and they're telling you it doesn't matter. And all it takes is all the people that take brain bullets. The brain bullet enters and it smashes that small rational part of their brain that should be like, you know what, screw that, I'm going to look into this. They don't even do that anymore. They just roll over and they do what they're told.
They can't even sift through the double
just so they can have a donut. Yeah. It's insane.
I know, like they talk. It's like it's like to be an adult in the United States, and this is lots of bad stuff is happening globally, but we'll just focus on obviously here in our own country. But like with the whole technocracy and the technocratic takeovership of the world, but the way that the technocrats look at everybody, people, is and Klaus Schwab says this. I had to put his book down for a minute. I'm totally going to do a show on this book, but I had to put it down for a minute because it bothered me so much. But he refers to people as human capital. Yes.
Ooh, and that's a whole other discussion.
Capital or collateral?
right.
It's kind of same.
So, and then here's this other thing to connect it even closer to home in our own state of here in Connecticut. I was in the banking committee for the public bank, for the green bank. And again, we're like cattle, we're commodities. So this man, he was the head of I want to say it's UBS is the bank. I could be wrong and I apologize about that, but it was this big bank. And he comes in a $5,000 suit. The clerks in the hearing, and they're like, I felt like I was at a club or something. They're like, they look like something out of a mob movie, okay? They didn't put the lineup of who's testifying. I kept asking. They didn't like the fact that I was there. And I never got to testify, and I got so tired of being there. There's stuff going on concurrently with vaccination stuff that I needed to go to, but I was in this hearing because I care about it too, because it's all connected to the total technocratic takeover of society, from tolls to this to that and everything else. But what they said is that we're debt capital, and that user fines and fees was the way to go to build money for the state system. And I'm just like, this sucks.
Yeah.
This sucks. Craziness what these folks are doing. It's I'm tired of being ruled by this and the technocratic takeover. I'm so glad you brought up that word, because people need to hear that more, what technocracy and the technocratic takeover is.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. And, you know, it's funny you should also talk about capitalism. I mean, human capital, that's what we are. And it's really what capitalism is based on, because capitalism, one of the reasons anarchism is not so much into the capitalism thing is because capitalism by its very nature creates social inequality.
It makes sense.
And that's really important. And I'm not saying that you can't get a free market to work, or there can't be trade and people can't, you know, buy as many TVs as they want. I'm not talking about that. But, you know, capitalism in itself creates an imbalance in society. You have your capitalists, and your local mom and pop donut shop they're not capitalists. No, capitalists, we're talking about Google, we're talking about Pepperidge Farm, Remembers, you know, we're talking about big companies.
Yeah.
Those are capitalists.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that create all of the jobs. And those jobs create wage slavery. So that's our society, it's how our society currently works. And that's why you have people slaving to the bone. Back in the day, you know, a generation or two ago, like your great-grandparent or your grandparents, they worked their butts off. They put their money away, and they had houses to give their kids.
Dirt poor, built a beautiful home.
Yeah, and they had money in the bank, and after it was gone, they were able to divvy it up, and kids were cool. And that's still possible, but it's a lot harder these days.
Yeah, it's really
very
changed.
difficult. And I was talking about debt capital. Student loans is a scourge on our society right now. And I understand the idea, you take loans out. Well, if you took the loans out and you pay the loans back, I get that. But you have to equate, you have to figure in that, especially this generation, my generation, we were pushed so hard to college when we really shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And we were all convinced that we had to go to college. We all went to college. We all took on debt, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000, $200,000, depending on how much time you spent in college. By the time, before you can own a house, before you've ever bought a new car, you're in so much debt for the rest of your life. It's debilitating. And this is something we've created.
Yeah.
So as I'm paying back my student loans, a meager $80,000, I'm watching what's happening to the student loan companies. And so I'm paying it when I finally get to pay it, and I realize I'm not even paying on the principal balance. I'm simply just paying interest payments.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. And then all of a sudden I'm getting calls from these other companies, and they're like, oh, well, you need to do this, and you got to set up payments this way. I'm like, well, I was paying Sally Mae. They're like, oh, we're taking your loan over. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So I start paying them. Turns out they have to get my permission to do that. So now they're selling my loans.
Wow.
Collection agencies are calling me, taking over the loans, and it's going all over the place. I have no idea where my money's going. I don't know if a single dime of my money is paid back more than a...
Wow. So that's, so this is what I would call predatory lending.
Oh, it is.
And
It is. And this is what we're putting our kids
You can't even say
into.
it's a voluntary contract.
We're handing
so
our
much is
children.
withheld from you.
We're handing our children to the loan companies, and we're handing our children to the banks. And they're a big part of this technocracy. And these loan companies have flat out stated several times that they want people to be in debt. They want them to default on their loans, because that's where they can really commoditize them, spread them out, sell off their debt, and make money. So they actually created a system that and got everyone got shot with the brain bullets, and they started giving their kids sacrificially to the colleges and to the loan companies, and now we have an incredible amount of capital. That's just, it's something we have to deal with. And you can't, I get it, all you capitalists out there and all you libertarians out there saying, it's like, well, you took the debt out and everything. I get that. But it's much more complicated than that.
It is.
And we are all part of the problem. And a lot of people should not be going to college. They shouldn't be doing it. They should be picking up a trade. They should be working hard. They should be saving their money. They should be building a base.
I want to see more apprenticeships.
First kid I ever knew that bought a house, he did it because he worked his ass off. He started a business. He didn't go to college. He was like 19, 20. He bought a house. He built his own lawn care system.
See, that is like a beautiful thing too with people, like and I think about my own grandparents too, and back in the day where people, like my grandparents didn't even graduate high school. Both of them, they left. I forget the story exactly, but I remember they were at my high school graduation. And they're like, you're like the first in a generation, because my mom got her GED and I was the one that graduated high school, went off to college because that's what I thought, that's what I'm supposed to do. And I think they're selling this idea in a predatory way, saying this is what you need to make it in society. And then what is happening is like and I've never thought about it like that before. So I really appreciate that perspective, connecting it to the debt capital. And the whole idea is that we are a commodity to be controlled, to be, we're less than human to these leaders, this elite class that has taken over and corrupted our system, these corporations, and how it all goes back and it connects into this way of enslaving ourselves. And it was, there's this quote, I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said about the bankers. And this is where I think is our biggest problem.
I know
where
what quote you're talking about.
Beware of the bankers, or our children will be homeless on the shores that their fathers fought for. And, we see that with mortgages. Mortgages are ridiculous. You buy a house for $100,000, you pay the bank $500,000 back. I get that the bank is going to loan money and should, that's a service, so you pay for the service, but it's not a balance. The usury is something that our society is creating a system of slavery by doing that with the student loan debt, which is terrible.
It is.
It's so terrible to strap a person with that type of debt before they even had a start in life for young people. And something as a society, I think that we need to change that practice altogether.
Agreed.
We need to stop the predatory lending, and we need to go back into like apprenticeships and learning how to open up your own business. And they don't teach any of that stuff in the public school system.
And it's like you could go on. I go on and on about student loans, but I don't know if people realize, like, student loans, you actually can't declare bankruptcy and get rid of your student loans. That is not, you can do that with a house mortgage, all these other loans, loans that you take and you should pay back, and there's a safety hatch for you if for some reason the bank is really hitting you, or who knows what happens. So anything could happen, and you can end up on the outs. People with six-figure incomes end up on the streets. It happens. But with student loans, you cannot. They've designed it, so that you cannot declare bankruptcy. You pay back your student loans. It doesn't do anything for your credit. But when you don't pay, that really hurts your credit.
So you pay back a student loan, and you spend years paying it back. And that doesn't give you like a good credit score at the very minimum for paying that loan back?
Student loans do almost nothing for your credit.
It's insignificant when it comes to mortgages.
Yeah.
Wow. So we talk about all of these problems, living under the state, and I do believe that my husband and I think that we see capitalism a little bit differently. I mean, I do definitely decry crony capitalism, but I do believe in the possibility of a free market. I also think that for people who want more socialist or communist systems, and this has, with the foundational rule of it being a voluntary society, contract, what have you. I err more on the opinion of these things because they're secondary to what anarchism is for me. And as long as they're voluntary, I say, the world is a complex ecosystem, and there's not a blanket solution for everything. Some people are going, and believe me, it's like this binary bipartisan holdover for the ANCOPs and the ANCAPs and the ANCOMs, and oh my God, I've been in plenty of like anarchist groups on social media, and it's like the Sneetches and the Starbelly Sneetches, or I don't know if you've ever seen Babylon 5, but it's like the purple and the green Drazies, green, purple, and they just,
I don't think anyone's gonna get that
out. Well, okay.
I get it though.
I know you do. But they're just like, capitalists are not anarchists, communists are not anarchists, and it's just so unproductive. And if it's a voluntary society, if you agree to enter into exchange and living situations, I feel that these systems could all work, but the state has to be absent from it, right? And I would say even with living under the state, because you guys were touching upon problems like predatory lending systems. Well, who do you think gives those companies the power? Imagine if you took away the enabling of the state, so that these companies didn't have the state to enforce their benefit anymore, right? They couldn't manipulate the state to legislate laws that benefited them and screwed us. Well, then you're talking about the potential to see a truly free market, and that's another thing is people act like, these ideas are novel, that they've never been tried, but the fact of the matter is that the modern concept of the state as we know it now is relatively a very new thing. Just within the past couple of hundreds of years, people have had voluntary systems and societies for thousands of years, regardless of whether it was, a monarchy or whatever. They had their own societies. I don't think people realize this, and I think it's really important for people to understand that even if you live under the state and you've got all of these problems, you can still find solutions that are closer to bringing back your individual autonomy, your personal sovereignty, just by maybe finding a way around it instead of busting through the wall. You find different ways to achieve more independence, to support your liberty. I'm a big fan of subversive tactics and agorism. If the state makes a law and I see a feasible way to get around that, like say for instance, they said no live music. Let's use that for instance. They said no live music. They shut down the music venues, but we still did our thing. We found a way around it. Yeah. Technically we're breaking laws, but are we harming people? Are we aggressing against people? No, I don't think so. But I see what the edicts of our autocratic rulership within the state of Connecticut was doing was violently immoral. And so I said, yeah, no, I'm going to do my thing anyway, and I'm going to find people who want to do that thing with me. And we started a very peaceful, musical, little tiny revolution. you know, and it's been really awesome. Do we make money? No. But we get together, we create community, we conspire to support our autonomy and pave the way for opportunities in the future that won't leave us beholden to the whims of the state should they decide to try and cut off our lifeline again. And I am not okay with that. And same thing with, you know, let me just say before, because I can go off on a tangent. I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. But I feel that everything that a person who thinks that it's not possible without government, all of your questions, all of your concerns can be reduced down to one thing. How do you stop bad people from doing bad things, right? Because if you think about it, think about any question you have right now. Well, how would this work in an anarchy? Well, if there aren't people to enforce this, then how are you going to stop kidnapping? And how are you going to stop trafficking? And how are you going to stop theft and all of these things, right? I will use this example, okay? We have police officers, right? And some people will say, well, if you don't believe, you know, in government and you don't support the police, and that's a whole other topic. I think it's important to have healthy relationships with the police, but I do believe that they have a disproportionate privilege of violence, and I think that their position is immoral. And people will say, oh, well, then don't call the cops the next time, you know, you're burglared. Well, I would say that is kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not accurate, because police officers have a monopoly on violent. Well, they have a monopoly. Like, you can't just take matters and justice into your own hands, right? Okay, so
it's illegal. It's
not that the police is there to protect you. They have a monopoly on protecting you. If that make, or should I say, response to crimes, right? So before you call the police, say someone breaks into your house, you are the one that is 100% responsible for protecting yourself. The cop isn't there to protect you. True. You have to protect you and your family, right?
Yeah.
So how would you make? So you would have to make that decision in that instance, right? And it really comes down to the fact that, do you want someone to tell you that you're not allowed to make that decision? You understand? It comes down to, you say, well, you know, I would want to make that decision, but then you would justify saying that you don't want other people to make these decisions for themselves that you don't agree with. But then what are you really saying? Are you saying that you're for rights, that you're for your rights, for everyone's rights, or just the things that you want to do, you know? I think the Socratic method is really important when you're looking at morality and you're trying to justify why you think it's okay to control other people. You need to ask yourself, you know, what if this was done to me? You know, the golden rule, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for people to step back and ask themselves, when you say freedom, when you say liberty, what does that really mean to you? You know, is it just your idea, or do you truly mean liberty? Is freedom and liberty a pie that can be sliced up and dished out according to what you think is okay? Because then what are you really saying? You're still talking about removing someone else's right to consent, to live their lives the way that they want, to make decisions, to protect their families, you know? And so as anarchists, you know, we value freedom so much, you know, and a stateless society does not necessarily mean that you're going to have all these anarchists who value freedom and non-aggression. You know, a really awesome principle that a lot of us go by, and not all anarchists, I would say, adhere to something like this, but we value something called the non-aggression principle, right? And we call it the NAP. And it basically means that, you know, violence is only moral when you're talking about being attacked directly. You know, theft acts of aggression, offensive violence, we consider completely immoral. And a lot of the violence that comes from the state is prophylactic, right? It's the idea that there might be a crime committed, so we should make this law so that people can't do this thing, right? But they're essentially creating crimes that weren't crimes in the first place. I might be going off on a tangent. So this is why I need to write things down. I think I am. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. This is great. I love it.
Let me try and gather my thoughts. Okay, so my point is that all of your concerns can be reduced to how do you stop bad people from doing bad things? Well, cops don't stop a person from breaking into your house and harming you. You are responsible for stopping that person from harming you. And with all of these things that we're seeing with our rights being taken away, and they are. They are. I know some people don't think they are, but they are. It's violently so. And I feel that you need to. There's nothing wrong with protesting and having rallies. It's great for networking. It's great for publicity. It's great to piss off your legislators that sit on their high thrones and control you. But what's really, really important is to gather together and to create independent systems of support. You're scared of your kids not going to school because you disagree with a vaccine or you disagree with them being masked. Talk to people. There are so many different activist groups out there, thousands. I mean, just one group has 11 to 15,000 people or something like that. There are so many parents in there. You have the ability to get together with people, but it requires your accountability. It requires your trust. It requires you putting effort towards the kind of life that you want to build instead of being mad at your legislator and begging them to build it for you. And that's kind of a fundamental thing about anarchists is that, we don't have to pander to the state to build the life that we want. Granted, we're restricted in many ways, but where we can take a yard when they maybe give us an inch, because it's all permission. It's not really liberty. You're given permission. Yeah. We take a yard. You want to live off grid? Find a state, find an unincorporated town, see what the zoning laws are, and go live in a ditch with a tarp over it until you build a house one day or whatever the heck you want to do. People are finding ways to get around the system in this country, and they don't even call themselves anarchists. They're just regular old people, we're all regular old people, but we are not separate from people. Sorry. My point is that I'm rambling. My point is that, there are many ways that I bet you're doing every day that you didn't even really consider, that you are keeping the powers of the state in check, or at least subverting them by doing your own thing anyway. That's not harming anyone. It's not immoral. And that's another thing, is that legality does not mean morality. There are plenty of laws out there that are very immoral, very unethical, and so it's good to separate those things. And we are not violent people. We are not chaos. We are not all of the things that the state has successfully propagandized the world to think we are. We are actually builders. We are creators. We are life lovers. We are liberty lovers. We are community oriented. And we want to build towards liberty with you.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love it. And thank you guys so much. So we're at about an hour, so I'm gonna end because I want to take these videos and put them up on BitChute. And speaking of building something different, you guys can follow me on Telegram. I have a channel there, J Cherry Presents. I'm also on MeWe, which I finally got my account set up there. It was blocked out for a bit, and it's a pretty cool social media site that are saying they're not gonna censor or whatever. We'll see how it goes. But just to stay connected in various other ways, so I just want to put that out there. And of course, you can go to my website. I'm just about to come out with a newsletter and ways to stay connected and things that we're doing that not going to post on Facebook, that I will be putting out in a newsletter. So you can reach out at jcherrypresents.com. And thank you guys so much for being here for this great conversation that we've had. I really appreciate the two of you. I think there's so much more I want to discuss with you about agorism and all kinds of things like that. We'll have to get together again and talk more, because it's been a good time, and I think this is what it takes for us to share in these ideas and share in this consciousness and this discussion, because this is how we grow as humanity. Because we are not cattle. We are not somebody's capital. We are not that. We are sovereign beings from the great creator, however you want to call that entity, from where it is we came, that no one can say for sure, but here we are, and it's divine. It's beautifully divine. So thank you guys again.
I would say, if I could leave anybody with a word of wisdom, is to please teach your children to advocate for themselves. Teach them that they have so much power. They have much more power. They don't have to just perform and behave. They have intuition. They have dreams. They have their own morality and ideas about the world, and it's really important to teach them to advocate for themselves.
Great point to end on. I appreciate you guys so much. That is so poignant. Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I'll be back live with more videos coming up. And I just posted a video today of Mike Mattingly in Hartford, so that's on my wall on Facebook. I'm going to get that out onto YouTube and also onto Twitter and into BitChute. So you can follow my channel also at BitChute. I'm calling that Clown World News. It's J Cherry's Clown World News, because it's like we're in a clown world. Thanks for hanging out and being a part of this, and we'll be back again and have this conversation more.